Hello, this is Iterating, and in today's video we're going to look at how to process tracks and events using Vegas. So we're going to look through tracks at the various events that are on the timeline, and we're going to, if they're selected, we're going to deselect them. If they're deselected, we're going to select them. So let's get started. Let's start with the test project that we used last time. Our scripts for Vegas will generally follow this format. You'll have your using sections, then you'll have the section where we put our actual code, and then you'll have the entry point, which is where we come in from Vegas. So let's start by getting rid of this message box that we used in the previous test, and we're going to start by putting our code in. To process the tracks, we can access the tracks by myvegas.project.tracks. So now to process these tracks, we need to go through each individual track that might be in this project. So we're going to use a for each command, which will let us go through each of the various tracks in Vegas. So we type in for each, and then we want to look at tracks. So this is going to be, we're going to create a variable of type tracks. And then we need to give this variable a name. For this variable, we are going to call it myTrack. And we want to look at all of the tracks in myvegas.project.tracks. Now we're going to put our brackets in. The brackets mean for every track, this is the stuff we want to do to them. Everything inside these two brackets. So now that we've found the track, we want to go through each of the events in that track. So once again, let's do a for each. And this time we're going to look at track events. So for every track event, let's just call it my event and my track. So this time we're looking for all of the events in this one specific track. Now, what are we going to do with each event in that track? The first thing we want to do is look at the myEvent.selected property. What we want to do is set that equal to true if the event was not selected, and set this to false if the event was selected. So there's some various ways we could do this. We could do something like if my event dot selected, then set my event dot selected equals false. And then we could come down here, if not my event dot selected, come in and set my event dot selected equals to true. And this will certainly get the job done if that's all we're really wanting to do, but that is definitely not the most efficient way of doing this. A more efficient way would be to change this line right here. Instead of putting another if there, we could say else. Then if my event dot selected, if that's true, then we set it to false. Otherwise, we set it to true. However, in this particular case, there's definitely a much simpler way of doing this. If it's true, we want it to be false. If it's false, we want it to be true. So true is not false. False is not true. So let's put in my event dot selected equals not my event dot selected. And that's all we need to do. I see we have a red line up here, and that is indicating that we have an issue. So when looking at this, we're actually wanting to process the events. Up here we said my Vegas.project.tracks. Now under my track here, we need to specify that we're looking at the events on that track. So now you can go to compile this thing. Once the build is succeeded, we can open Vegas Pro. Now let's just add some images to the timeline. So we'll add these images here. We'll add these images here. And then let's add some more images here. Now let's just kind of randomly select these images. So I'm just going to select and then hold down the Control key and just select several of these images. So now we have several selected. Let's run the script. So we go to Tools, Scripting, Run Script. I'm already in my test script bin release folder, so I can grab my DLL there and choose Open. And you notice now the ones that were selected are not selected, so these are not selected anymore. And all the ones that were not selected are now selected. If I run it again, we revert back to the ones that were previously selected, and all the ones that were originally not selected are no longer selected again. So, by using our for each statements, we can easily go through every one of the tracks in the project, and then for each track, we can go through every one of the events in that track, and then we can start modifying the events or the tracks however we need to do so. Let's say that we only wanted to process the events on the tracks that are selected. We could add a statement in here: if my track dot selected, if the track is selected, then we're going to put this whole thing in brackets. Now this will only work on selected tracks. Okay, to make these changes, we first have to exit Vegas, and then we can build this script again. Once the script is built, let's restart Vegas. Add the clips to the timeline again. Now let's select the events again that we had previously selected. And run the script. This time you will notice that only the events on this track change, and these tracks are still the same because it is only processing the tracks that are selected, and this is the only track that is selected. So if we select now the bottom two tracks, run the script again, and now only the bottom two tracks were changed. So as you can see, it is very easy to actually go through and step through each of the individual tracks in the project and step through each of the individual events that are on that track. And then you can start make modifications to any of the events or any of the tracks as needed. Please sign up at www.JETDV.com and subscribe on YouTube to get further notifications on when new videos are presented.